this afternoon to our Facebook Live weekly webinar about all things HR. My name, for those who haven't joined us before or don't know me, is Pearson. I'm from Pinnacle People Solutions, and as I said, a very warm welcome to our weekly webinar about all things HR. So our company, Pinnacle People Solutions, provides human resource services, advice, support, solutions, strategies, etc., you name it, to regionally based small to medium-sized businesses and not-for-profit organisations. And we are here to help you and your business adapt and thrive. You can contact either myself or my fantastic team anytime via Facebook, email or phone, or you can visit our website at pinnaclepeoplesolutions.com.au. So as a continuation of our COVID-19 employer advisories, every Wednesday evening from this week, so we had been doing Thursday evenings at 5:30, but we've moved that forward to Wednesday evenings at 5:30. We will be doing a deep dive into a particular HR topic to provide information and insights on topics of interest to regionally based business. So if there is anything that you'd particularly like to hear about, don't hesitate, please, to get in touch with us. If you're watching this on Facebook, then you can subscribe to receive notifications of when we're going live on Facebook by clicking the bell icon in the top right corner of your screen. That means you will never miss a HR update or webinar from us ever again. So if that appeals to you, please go ahead and click the bell icon in the top right corner of your screen. So today, for those who are frank and fearless and have decided to watch this webinar either live now or watch it later, if you're watching it now or whenever you do watch it and there's other business owners, managers that you think would benefit, please refer them. We'd love to get the word out because today's topic is a curly one. So today I'll be doing a deep dive into the topic that I've titled Threading the Needle, dealing with difficult staff situations and protecting your business. It's something that most business owners and managers absolutely hate and will generally avoid doing like the plague. So all the while, however, while you're not dealing with the difficult staff situations that might arise from time to time, you are unknowingly risking the reputation and potentially the viability of your business. I'm not trying to scare you, but it's really important to deal with these things as and when they come up. So to begin with, I guess one of the key things that I would say to you is that one of the ways in which you can protect against having to have these conversations or having to have them very often or have a difficult staff situation is first and foremost to set the expectations with your staff. And there's a number of ways in which you can do that. First is to have really well written and appropriate position descriptions for each of the jobs in your business. And again, we're not talking about a 1,000-page War and Peace. 1 page or 2 at the most is generally sufficient, and it just is really clear about what the role and responsibilities are and what your expectations are for the person in that job. Secondly, setting the expectations by having good, robust policies and procedures in place. At the moment, we're all being encouraged to have appropriate COVID-safe plans in place, for example, to make it really clear for our staff as well as for our customers and our clients just what the expectations are for them and what they can expect from us as a business in terms of their COVID safety. So COVID is just one example, of course, a timely one, but you need to have good, robust policy and procedures in place in your business to really clearly establish the expectations that you have of your staff, your clients, etc. And the third element in the setting the expectations element is to provide really good regular feedback, guidance, and be having conversations. There is no point you having conversations with your staff about objectives that you've set for them that are completely unspoken. The goals that you might have in your mind that you've never mentioned to them. So it's incredibly important to be really clear about, first and foremost, setting your expectations. Secondly, it's really important to be prepared for having the conversation, the difficult conversation that you might need to have occasionally with a staff member. It's incredibly important in having or preparing to have that conversation that you're prepared, that you are present, that you listen, that you actively listen, that you plan for action, and that you acknowledge the issues. So in terms of managing either or both conduct and performance, let's be really clear that employee conduct are things like breaches of company policy, dishonesty, criminal or other breaches of law, that they are issues around employee conduct. Then you can have issues around employee performance, and they would be things that might come up through, for example, performance appraisals, promotion, demotion, and potentially personal grievances that staff may have. So your aims in dealing with issues of either conduct or performance, as they might present in your staff, first and foremost, your aim would be to correct or improve the standard of conduct or performance, to provide an opportunity for the person concerned to correct unacceptable conduct or performance, to ensure that all staff are treated fairly and equitably, and to address each case on an individual basis and relative to the circumstances. So, not surprisingly, setting yourself up, as I said, for a situation where it's unlikely that you would need to have these conversations very often, we talked about starting with managing expectations and setting those expectations through things like position descriptions, policy procedures, conversations, feedback, etc. So not surprisingly, those things all start with selecting the right people. So if you have good, robust selection protocols in place, you know clearly what you're going out for, you know what attributes you want in the person or people that you want to select to join your business, you're half the way there in terms of getting people that are going to align with your business values and the expectations that you have of them in a particular role. Second of all, as I've already mentioned, establishing your expectations, having a really good, robust employment contract, position description, policies, and goals or standards for your business. Managing the person's performance really effectively during the probationary period. So that will generally be for a 6-month period after appointment, and that's your opportunity to see and test if the person you've selected is the fit you wanted for the role, and for them to test whether your organisation is the right fit for them. Having an effective performance management system in place to manage underperformance and reward high achievers is a really important tool moving beyond the probation period. And this is in place. This should be in place whether you've got one staff member or whether you've got 500 of them. And finally, and the most important focus for us in tonight's webinar, is to address issues as and when they arrive. Now, there are some key tools that can help you along this particular journey. The first and foremost is a performance management checklist. The second is a performance and misconduct policy. The third is a code of conduct. And the fourth is a performance appraisal process. Now, all of these things we're actually going to pop up on our website after the webinar to let you get access to, as well as a fact sheet or an information sheet associated with today's webinar. So let's ask the question then, when it comes to any of us as business owners or managers in business dealing with difficult staff situations, or not, as the case may be, which is part of the reason for today's topic, we've had a number of requests for this one, is why don't we confront issues? And what are the consequences if we don't confront those issues? So today I'd like to answer those two questions. Why don't we confront issues? We do have a live chat screen up during this webinar, so So don't hesitate. Good evening to those who've already joined us and have waved hello. We really value having you with us this evening, and it's fantastic that you're here. So ask any questions that you might have live as we go along. I will keep a close watch on the chat screen and attempt to answer those questions as we go along. Otherwise, you can feel free to get in touch with us afterwards. We'd be delighted to sit down and have a no obligation free conversation about what you're facing at the moment and how you might handle it. So why don't we confront the issues? What are the consequences when we don't? And I'd like to take you through 2 case studies to really highlight some of the issues that can be in play. And these are real life situations. We're getting them every week from employers and cases like them. So I really thought it would be helpful tonight to unpack those for you and just kind of really explain how they were handled and what the consequences were. So that first question, difficult conversations, why do we avoid them? And look, there's so many different reasons why, and quite frankly, let's acknowledge up front that humans really don't enjoy conflict, and they will tend to avoid a situation that they perceive might be one that would involve conflict. And the first reason for that is fear. We are fearful of a lot of things, in terms of potentially dealing with a situation that might bring us into conflict with another person, whether it's in the work environment or whatever the circumstances are. We're fearful. Particularly if you're a regionally based employer or manager, some of that fear will be around the fact that you might know this person well, you might well know their family, they might have been employed by your business for some time, maybe they have familial and other connections in the community that you also have, that you're worried about the impact on those. You might be concerned about dealing with performance or conduct issues and then having to eyeball the person in aisle 3 at Coles when you're doing your shopping on the weekend, or that your kids are in the same soccer team, or perhaps even worse still, on opposing sport teams. So there's a fair whack of fear. So we do have to acknowledge that. We also have to acknowledge that part of the reason we'll avoid conversations also is because we don't know how to have the conversation, the difficult conversation, or indeed what to say. Sometimes we think that we'll make things worse, that it's better just to leave it on my to-do list. That's the only place it's going to be, and maybe it'll all just blow over or go away or what have you. And finally, let's confront something that all of us have some concerns about and might make us avoid difficult conversations, and that is that we think that the other person mightn't like us anymore. And all of us don't like the idea of being in a situation where that might be the end result, and so that can be another reason why we avoid having those difficult conversations. So let's have a look now at why, not just why we avoid having those conversations. I think we've hit on some key points as to why we avoid it. But the second question is, what are the consequences? What happens when we don't say or do anything? So the first thing that I think it's really important for business owners and their managers to really be clear about is that poor behaviour or poor performance in the workplace is deemed to be acceptable while ever you don't deal with it. And the fact of the matter is that both behaviour and performance that is inadequate or insufficient or unsatisfactory in some form is going to be something that not only you're seeing, but colleagues are seeing and potentially clients are seeing as well. So therefore, that leads me to my second point about what happens when we don't do or say anything. And that is that it impacts on other staff, and it impacts on client service, and it impacts on your business reputation. Those things are all happening as long as you don't deal with it. There's also finally the other third element that comes into play when we don't do or say something about poor performance or behaviour, and that is that there is a high risk of litigation if you end up terminating or taking corrective action. So that is something really to bear in mind as well, and we're going to unpack that a little bit in one of the case studies that I'm going to look at this afternoon. So let's move in then to our first case study. So this is a situation, not an uncommon situation in terms of ones that we help business owners and their managers with. So we had this particular situation recently where we had a sick leave pattern. Somebody who was taking regular 9-day fortnights and personal carers leave adjacent to annual leave and public holidays. The pattern, when the business finally sat down and had a look at it, was fairly consistent in terms of it being a Friday or a Monday, and it being absences for personal and carers leave being adjacent to annual leave and public holidays. There were no certificates for those absences. Other staff were incredibly upset and having to pick up the work. This had been a sick leave pattern that had been in place for over 6 months. And what the business owner had to confront was that it was becoming really clear to him that team productivity was falling. There were other absences as well starting to happen aside from this particular pattern of absence for this one staff member. And he admitted that, you know, he should have been onto this earlier, but he was finally deciding to get onto it. So let's have a look at the facts associated with this particular case. So this particular person was entitled to paid personal carers leave. Under the National Employment Standards, anybody who is part-time or full-time is entitled to 10 days per annum, part-time pro rata. The other fact that this business owner was not aware of and didn't have policy in relationship to is that employers can request certification for every personal carers leave absence. Now, personal carers leave, yes, it's a form of leave that people are entitled to under the National Employment Standards, but they're entitled to it on the basis that they can demonstrate their eligibility for it. Personal carers leave is no different to, say, parental leave. You're also entitled to, if you are employed according to the National Employment Standards, you're also entitled to parental leave if you're going to be either giving birth to or adopting a child, or the partner of somebody who is in those circumstances and you're in those circumstances with them. But if neither of those things are evidenced, then you're not entitled to parental leave, in the same way that if you don't have the appropriate certification, you're not necessarily entitled to paid personal carers leave. So this employer was surprised to find that he can request certification. He was also surprised to find that he could seek independent medical assessment of a staff member if this kind of pattern of absence presented itself, because he needed to ask the question, is this pattern of absence, whether or not it's certified, provided, you know, there's medical certification for it, is this person's health and well-being consistent with this pattern of absence? The other thing that the business owner needed to know, and we needed to make it really clear to him was the case, is that you cannot terminate somebody for illness unless they've had 3 months out of 12 months on sick leave, personal carers leave. So that's another thing to bear in mind. So in terms of this particular case study and any similar situation that you might have in terms of, say, somebody having a pattern of absence from the business, how do I handle it? So some of the questions we were asked by this business owner was, what are the key issues that I need to address? What's the process that I need to follow to address those issues? And what are the risks of this case, of taking action versus not taking action? So let's delve a little bit deeper into those. So let's have a look at the approach that we took with this business owner. First and foremost, you need to be sure that you're following policy. If you don't have policy in place, then you can be really flying blind. We can still help you follow an appropriate due process in the absence of policy, but it's incredibly important that ideally you do have good policy in place and that your staff are clear on the expectations and obligations that you have. This is really critical. It's important, if a pattern of absence starts to emerge, that you review it as soon as possible. It's important that you meet with the staff member. You need to give them notice in writing that you want to meet with them about something to do with their performance or conduct, and that you invite them in that written notice of meeting to bring a support person with them if they wish to that meeting. You need to discuss the pattern of absence with them and understand that in this particular situation, for example, you can seek an independent medical assessment to determine if the health status of your staff member is consistent with that particular pattern of absence. So what are some of the red flags associated with this particular case? So there were a number of red flags with this case, and the following become critical in managing anybody's absence patterns. First and foremost, that you're following policy, as I mentioned, and ensuring that all staff are clear on expectations and obligations. It's incredibly important that in doing so, in following the policy or due process that you're consistent and fair in the application of what your expectations are. It's also really important that you document the process, that you give notice of meetings in writing and provide support, that you set expectations really clearly, and that you measure the outcomes of what your expectations are. It's also really important that you maintain strict confidentiality and that you make no assumptions. Due process here is your friend. Don't assume why this pattern of absence is in place, but certainly seek to find out what's behind it. So if you mishandle absenteeism, and I don't know many business owners who haven't had, at least for a temporary period, a situation of absenteeism issues in their business from time to time. If you mishandle it or you don't handle it at all, it can lead to poor morale and performance and productivity issues across your team. And this is exactly what had happened in this particular case. Other staff were ticked off. They were really unhappy that the business manager had not dealt with this situation. They were cranky about the fact that they had to pick up the slack and the workload of this person, that their absences were, in their mind, pretty predictable. Fridays, Mondays, adjacent to leave and public holidays. You could be open to a claim of discrimination if you don't handle a situation like this well. If you start making assumptions about somebody based on whether they might have a temporary or permanent disability, you could have claims of bullying or general protections breach to the Fair Work Commission if you get so frustrated with the situation that you handle it poorly. Even though you might need to handle it, how you handle it becomes an incredibly important thing. You could be at the mercy of a workers' comp claim, or you could in fact be at the mercy of an unfair dismissal claim. And significant numbers of unfair dismissal claims are going up by 40 and 50% year on year. So these are significant risks for business. Okay, so that was a case of pattern of absence. We sent the person for a medical assessment in this instance to see whether their pattern of absence was consistent with their health. It was found that that was not the case, that they were perfectly well and healthy to do the full range of duties of their job. So they were given a warning that in future all absences needed to be provided. There needed to be medical certificates provided, and they were warned about absence from the work environment that was not certified moving forward. So in terms of case study number 2, this particular situation was one where there'd been a history of deteriorating performance by this particular staff member. Unfortunately, the business owner that came to us after he'd actually not handled the situation very well at all, and actually ended up with a workers' comp claim out of this situation. So this was a situation of a staff member whose performance was deteriorating. There was a disgruntled team and customer complaints that had highlighted this situation to their manager. Unfortunately, the supervisor hadn't dealt with it, had been aware of deteriorating performance, hadn't had the appropriate sit-down conversations with the staff member about what was going on, conveying the appropriate expectations, measuring performance, all of those things. None of that had happened. And what actually happened was that the supervisor raised the performance concerns ultimately in a heated exchange with the staff member in front of other team members and a customer. So they'd actually, they had expressed frustration before privately to the staff member, but this time they literally lost their cool in a heated exchange with the person in the reception area in front of other staff and a particular customer. What happened to cause the business owner to ring us was that the employee lodged a workers' compensation claim the following day after this heated exchange for an anxiety disorder arising from what they claimed was workplace bullying. Unfortunately, as a consequence of how that matter was handled, the claim was accepted, and it nearly crippled this business. So the situation nearly, in fact, bankrupted the business. We didn't get the call about this particular situation until the workers' compensation claim was lodged. So let's have a look at the facts around this particular situation. This situation also revealed that, unfortunately, the recruitment of this individual, which had taken place less than 12 months earlier, had not been done carefully. This was somebody who'd been recruited into the business on the basis of a colleague's recommendation who owned another business, who'd heard that this person was suitable, and the person was brought on with no appropriate employment contract or position description. So there was no careful recruitment, which is one of the expectations I mentioned about setting up initially. No careful assessment of what it was the business actually needed. And no assessment during the 6-month probation period. And the fact of the matter is that if you do set that up appropriately, you recruit appropriately, and then you use that probation period effectively, if somebody's unsuitable, you can terminate during that period. It's not hard. Chances are, if you've carefully recruited, the chances you have to do that are going to be pretty slim. But if you needed to, you can, and you can do so in a fairly straightforward way. You must follow due process in managing performance and provide support and training, and this had not happened in this particular instance. And the other thing that unfortunately wasn't available to this business owner is that reasonable management action, so taking reasonable management action, is a very solid defence to a workers' compensation claim, but only if it's valid and only if the situation was handled reasonably too. So while the business owner said, well, I lost my cool, but I was sick of this poor performance, and I was only raising genuine, management issues, that would have been a defence had this been handled appropriately, had this person tried to put in a workers' comp claim where the business owner could demonstrate, or the manager could demonstrate, that they'd raised the issues appropriately, they'd had formal notice of meetings, they'd been invited to bring a support person, the conversations had been documented, and then the person had put in a workers' comp claim for stress or anxiety. The answer would have been, we want the insurer to be doing a factual investigation and to be reasonably excusing the claim on the basis that the management action was entirely reasonable. Unfortunately, that wasn't a method available to this particular manager and business owner, because the way they handled the situation was not appropriate. So let's look at this particular situation, which unfortunately ended up in such a mess for this particular business owner. So what are the key issues? First and foremost, we need to ask that question. What are the key issues that you need to address when you've got a situation where somebody's not performing well? What is the process that you're going to follow to address those issues? And what are the risks of the case of taking action versus not taking action? So same as the first case study. What are the issues that you're going to address? Do you have an appropriate process in place to deal with it? And do you know what the appropriate process is to deal with it? You need to know the answer to both of those things. So the case study 2 approach is, again, making sure that you follow policy. If you don't currently have policy for your business around handling issues of conduct or performance, or you don't have those essential elements in place to make clear your expectations of somebody in their role via an employment contract, a good position description, good robust policy and procedures, good regular communication with them about your expectations, those things are really critical. So if you don't have that in place, please get it in place as soon as possible. Make sure that anybody's position description is clear on their duties and responsibilities, and that those things are very clearly things that you can assess someone's performance against. Make sure that you review performance concerns when and if they become clear, and as soon as they become clear. Meet with the staff member, give them appropriate notice, in writing, invite them to bring a support person with them. Both of those things are really important if you need to sit down and have this kind of conversation around conduct or performance with a staff member. Discuss your performance concerns with them openly. Consider their feedback and any mitigating issues they might raise with you. Ask them, is there any reason why this is happening, why things are going a bit pear-shaped, why those deadlines weren't met, and give them a clear time frame for improvement. Do up a one-page performance improvement plan. This is what I expect from you over the next few weeks. Here's what I expect that to look like. Let's work on it. Is there any other support that you need? Communicate regularly over that review period. Document your process and your expectations. This is critical, particularly if you ultimately do decide to terminate someone's employment. You need to have established that performance management history. And finally, determine if a performance warning is to be given, or indeed whether it might be serious enough that you might need to terminate employment. I'd suggest that you get advice before you do that, of course, but you need to consider those things. So the following are really critical red flags in successfully managing issues of performance or conduct. First and foremost, get sound advice. Even if you have those good expectations established through, employment contracts, a position description, policy and procedure, if you've got a tricky situation and a difficult staff situation, get sound advice. A no obligation free conversation can be the difference between you getting through this unscathed and having some real obstacles. Establish your expectations up front with your staff through the means that we've talked about this evening and communicate with them regularly. Follow your policy. Be clear on your expectations and obligations. Make sure that people's position descriptions are up to date. Be consistent and fair, like I mentioned for the first case that I talked about. Document the process. Make sure you keep file notes of meetings. Give notice of meetings formally in writing and ask for the person if they want to bring a support person with them. Maintain strict confidentiality and remember that due process is your friend. The way you handle a performance issue is just as important as the issues themselves that you're handling, and this was a classic case of that. It's no wonder that the manager and this fellow staff were frustrated. Customer complaints. There were clearly performance issues. That was obvious. Unfortunately, the way in which the person handled it really crippled them, because what happened was not only did they have poor morale in their business as a consequence of not having dealt appropriately with the performance issues, but the workers' compensation claim crippled them. They had a workers' comp premium of over $30,000 a year, which meant that time lost for any injury claim would skyrocket and affect their premium, which is exactly what happened. They also had to navigate a claim of bullying through the Fair Work Commission at the same time as the workers' compensation claim was underway. So it's incredibly important to get good advice, know exactly how you should be handling something, and do it the right way, because this was a business that nearly came unstuck as a consequence of all of the costs and the consequences associated with leaving this situation undone, and then losing their lollies at the time when a situation occurred and finding themselves even in more perilous hot water. So some of the practical realities coming out of my discussions about this with you this evening are the following. The behaviour you walk past is the behaviour you accept. So while you are dealing or not dealing with a situation of poor performance or poor conduct in your business, you might think that the only place it exists is on your to-do list without a cross through it. But I promise you that it is spreading like a cancer in your business, and by the time you realise its impact, it may well be too late for your team, for your business reputation, even the viability of your business, as was the case with the client that I mentioned in the second case this evening. Trust me, because people will be talking about it. People who are not happy in their work environment, boy, do they talk about it with their family, with their friends, having a schnitzel at the pub on a Friday night. By the time that message gets around to you that you're not considered to be a great employer, or that people are cranky, it's too late. to try and pull you back from what's going to be a very large abyss. So my advice is get it dealt with as soon as it starts to rear its head. Keep records of meetings and conversations about poor conduct and performance. Put everything in writing. Confirm any verbal instructions or outcomes simply in an email or some other form of written communication, so that you can be really clear about the history of that if you do need to proceed ultimately at some point to terminating. Get sound advice. Make sure that you've got good established expectations up front. Communicate regularly. Follow your policy. Have your policy in place to start with and follow it. Make sure that you're consistent and fair. Document your process and maintain confidentiality. Remember that due process is your friend, and that the way that you handle an issue of performance or conduct is just as important as the issue itself that you're handling. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm just having a look at our screen, and I don't believe that we have any other questions in there just at this particular point in time. But thank you so much for joining us this evening. This video will remain online on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our website at pinnaclepeoplesolutions.com.au if you'd like to catch up on it or watch it again later. We'll also be producing a fact sheet and those sample documents that I mentioned before that you'll be able to download from our website in the next few days. You can also sign up for a weekly digest of our Wednesday webinar, associated fact sheet, and Monday news updates to be delivered to your inbox every Tuesday by signing up to that on our website. So please join us next Monday for our update at 9:15 on Facebook Live to catch up on all of the important news from the last week, both COVID related and also general HR. So that is a news broadcast that we tailor specifically for regionally based small to medium businesses and not-for-profit organisations. Next week, I'm delighted to say that our webinar next Wednesday will focus and feature an interview with Richard Oates. Richard is one of the directors of BG Northwest and is also the managing director of Duffy's Automotive from Tamworth. He will be sharing his experience of recruiting for his businesses, why he did it, what surprised him, and what's involved. So tell all your colleagues, family and friends who might want to know how to recruit successfully to any role in a regional or rural area, and tune in next Wednesday for that wonderful interview with Richard at 5:30 p.m. In the meantime, please hug the people that you can, wave cheerily at those that you yet can't. Stay safe, stay socially distant, wear a mask if you're in public or social distancing is difficult. Wash your hands, keep up that great hand hygiene, and we'll really look forward to seeing you on Monday for our next update. Thank you.